Will the next pandemic target children? The World Health Organization and Bill Gates also, they all seem to think this, or at least be signaling that that would be the case. Cholera is the thing. I don't know if you guessed cholera when I gave you the chance to guess your next, what would be the next pandemic. Cholera may be it. And Bill Gates is saying that it will affect children this time. So those two things should have your attention. The World Health Organization completed their meeting last week to discuss giving them global power to control the next pandemic, because I guess they think they did an awesome job of the last one. This is something we've been discussing at length, the CA Plus treaty. Here's them like wrapping up their meetings last Friday. Yeah, we did it. It's good. We're working really hard. This is called the Intergovernmental Negotiating Body, which includes 194 countries. Now, they said, because we've been following it so closely, we've been picking apart things that we think will infringe on our liberties. They said that negotiations on the draft are going to continue over the next year. We originally had thought that they would be voting on this in May, in the spring of this year, but now they're saying they'll vote in 2024. So maybe we have more time, everybody, to push back on this. This is not a done deal yet. Here's the timeline they gave us. The next meeting will be April 3rd to 6th. And accordingly, they are on target to vote at the 77th World Health Assembly in 2024. So speak now or forever hold your peace about what you think about this. Recall when we went over the draft 2 weeks ago, here are some of the things that I expressed concern over from the actual document, is that it gives the World Health Organization the power to define the next pandemic, determine lockdowns. It gives them surveillance power. It allows them to determine treatments, mandate vaccines, control vaccine distribution, control vaccine IP and who profits from it, and also sort of redistribute everything, because they can say what constitutes an emergency and what constitutes a threat. They can call out climate change, global conflict, and illness, which in fact they are doing right now with cholera. And I'm going to show you.
Margaret Smith in our chat says Tedros, of course, who's the head of the WHO,
Yes.
could not get a handle on or control 3 cholera outbreaks in Ethiopia.
Okay,
So
that's a fair point, because he is from Ethiopia.
Right.
And so let's talk about how they're using this language around Ethiopia. Also, one thing from the CA Plus that gave us pause in a big way was this idea of an infodemic. These are the things that were still in draft when they entered the meeting last week. Maybe they've defined them since, but we still don't know, because I have not seen their edits. We still only know that they have yet to define these terms. The most upsetting to me is the word infodemic or interpandemic. You choose which one you like or don't like here. We're just sharing. This is a safe space. Now, this was part of the draft document that they were working on in closed doors. And we know that, as we don't know exactly how far they got, but what they gave us in a press release today showed us that they have about 300 amendments to what they've got so far. It says that this is an effort to make the world safer from communicable diseases and ensuring greater equity in the global response to public health emergencies. They say governments have been working to ensure consistency and alignment across the INB and IHR process, with proposed amendments will also be presented to the World Health Assembly in 2024 and would, together with future pandemic accord, provide a comprehensive, complementary, and synergistic set of global health agreements. So they want to make rules for everybody, all countries. Already, President Biden had expressed enthusiasm for this idea last year. We have no reason to suspect that he is not all in on whatever it was that they concluded in that meeting, unless a bill passes that would prevent him from doing so, like the one introduced in the Senate last week called the No W.H.O. Pandemic Preparedness Treaty without Senate Approval Act. It does have the potential to stop the president from doing this, but a bill like this died last year. So we're not hopeful, but who knows? Now, meanwhile, yes. Go ahead.
Really quick, I just want to throw in there. It's like they're saying that this is so open and giving and caring and all that, but one of the main lines is protecting the IP.
Yes.
It's like that is like counter to it being open, and this is a global pandemic. We want to save the world, but we got to focus on the IP because that's very important.
One of the things we talked about is that it requires all kinds of surveillance and tracking and reporting. But when it comes to the IP of a vaccine, it's very heavy on the word suggests, like, pharmaceuticals should or are suggested to work together and share the IP with world governments. They don't have to at all. They're loose and fast with that language. So in the last, I would say, 2 months, we've reported on different things that the World Health Organization continues to warn us about with increasingly strong language. We talked about Marburg virus. I refer you to that piece. We've already talked about fungus, right?
Right.
And so this week it's cholera. The Telegraph reported today that the WHO is now warning that at least 30 countries have seen an outbreak of cholera. But you might think cholera is a waterborne disease that's usually preventable with clean water, and you would be right. But the WHO is saying that this is an outbreak from a polycrisis. Do you remember this word?
Yeah, so this was the World Economic Forum. This was Klaus Schwab's new polycrisis that we are now facing. It's not just one crisis, it's going to be a polycrisis.
Which means they need the power for to control a lot of different things in order to prevent this polycrisis, which could be cholera, which is a horrifying disease. We're not minimizing cholera at all, but we reported on this word when it popped up in WEF documents on February 2nd, if you want to seek out that segment. And here is now that word being used in practice in the Telegraph today. It says cholera should be easily preventable and strikes only the most vulnerable who have no access to clean water or health care. This makes it a barometer of poverty as well as effectiveness of basic sanitation and health care, said this person. Many countries were facing a polycrisis where factors like poverty, displacement, crumbling infrastructure, natural disasters, and conflict all heighten the risk of cholera, she said. So then it goes on to tell us exactly what are the three things that it thinks are contributing to the outbreak of cholera: climate change, conflict, and COVID. So these are the three things that the World Health Organization needs power to control because of a polycrisis.
So
you see the rhetoric here, right?
I do, and what's hilarious to me is that they put climate first. Almost every, I think every one of them, not just like I think every famine, every outbreak that we have in the world is as a result of conflict, is as a result of mostly United States interceding in countries and destabilizing countries and causing a war. So almost every famine we have, whether it's, Syria to Yemen, you name it, it's because we interfere. It's conflict. It's not climate change.
Yeah.
But I love that that's their first freaking one on their list.
Even all the way back to the potato famine, a lot of those potatoes were shipped to England in Ireland, while people starved. A lot of it is supply chain issues more than actual famines. I don't know about, Bible days. That seemed like real famines. Are we not talking about that?
Well,
no.
I don't know. Yeah. Well,
7 years of famine.
Yeah. Well, yes. And then, of course, in Egypt, you definitely have when flooding of the Nile and receding. In some years, it would overflood and kill. And then sometimes you wouldn't get enough water. And then you would definitely, but no.
Okay. This is not related to, no. I've gone too far.
Yes.
This is not related to the WEF. What we're saying now, not that, of course, cholera isn't a devastating disease. It is. Everybody should have access to clean water. Period. But will it get better with more government oversight? That's what the WEF wants you to be scared and be like, oh, we better have someone on these three things: climate change, conflict, and COVID. This basically gives them access to everything so that we don't all get cholera. Here's the scary part is that we know that health officials were held back by knowledge that the pandemic did not affect children the way that it did adults. We know that we all may have behaved differently if COVID was harder on children than it was. And so we know they sort of have to mix that in the future, this idea that it's not just you this time, it's your kids, right? And then we're dealing with a different set of behaviors. I was thinking about it today because a lot of the bullshit that I swallowed around COVID, I can sort of forgive myself for listening to certain voices until I can't, right? And then some things that I have to take responsibility for cognitive dissonance, you know.
Right, we all do, right?
Okay.
Right.
But I would have behaved a lot more hysterically if I thought that it really was going to affect the children.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I would have come around to where I am now in this sort of self-reflective stage on COVID, I might still have been all in on COVIDism if I thought that it would save my kids.
Yeah, I don't know.
So, that's a terrifying thought. It's a terrifying thought experiment that I think we all should have. We don't have to share where we get when we do it.
But they're going to play on that fear. And I think that's what we need to be aware of, right? They're going to, if it's going to target our children, they say, right? This is what we need to be on the lookout for, because I don't think what they expected with COVID, with kids, natural immunity, kids were resilient and fine, right? It wasn't that. It was immunocompromised 80-year-olds in a senior citizen's home.
Yeah.
Right. That's who we should have been concerned about, not, 6-year-old kids.
Well, and unfortunately now it's going to be a requirement for getting into school. They're going to have to get, the jab. And so It's like it's still affecting kids in a big way, but not the actual disease itself.
Right.
The virus
mandates, the government policies. We're still seeing it. Even forget just like elementary school. We're seeing it at colleges. Colleges still have mandates all across. I mean,
so if you look at that and follow that means that all of their recommendations and things are going to be worse than what the possible thing could be in the first place. If it goes the way that this pandemic went.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to depend on them.
Right. And so, that's why a lot of the rhetoric around future pandemics, including this Bill Gates fictitious virus that he simulated with his foundation. Remember, we talked about this just last year in the fall, that the Bill Gates Foundation ran this simulation with fake news reports about a disease that could be. And, then this sort of, I'll show it to you, but it shows this like, oh my God, so scary disease. And then global leaders, and you're supposed to be scared that they may not be able to cooperate. That's the whole point of this exercise. Watch.
Officials in 2 Latin American countries alerted the WHO of several outbreaks of a new infectious disease that's mysteriously appearing across the region. Severe Epidemic Enterovirus Respiratory Syndrome 2025. Over the past 6 weeks alone, there have been 500 confirmed or suspected cases reported. The virus could cause a severe pandemic if early containment and mitigation efforts are not successful.
The pandemic in this type of situation and trend would be a risk for the global health security.
Pandemics are inherently political, financial, and so much broader.
We have not spoken on the leadership in country. And I think that we need to be also very careful. We cannot decide a lot of things without the leaders be involved and agree on that.
There is no substitute for national leadership.
It's important to support the local response or the national response.
Training those that are in these areas first, enabling them with the tools, protecting them, and if needs be, regional solidarity first.
At this stage, communication is key, and communication should include not just scientists with data, but also social, religious, and political leaders.
Trust. This is an essential issue, and trust was broken among countries, between populations and healthcare systems, between healthcare systems and governments.
I'm very sorry to say that in 2025, we need need to strengthen the health system.
WHO needs to be a voice for the voiceless.
No one is safe until all of us are safe.
As of today, there have been an estimated 1 billion cases worldwide, with more than 20 million deaths, including nearly 15 million children. Countless millions are alive, but left with paralysis or brain damage. The most successful countries are those which invested in preparedness and trained for this moment years in advance. This included having full-time pandemic preparedness and response teams, which conducted detailed operational planning and routinely tested those plans through exercises and drills. If more countries had participated and heeded the guidance, the toll might have been much less.
All right, someone in the chat just said they're doomsday couple, and you better not be talking about us because I didn't make this. We didn't make this video. Bill Gates Foundation did. And yes,
and
that is a doomsday.
Right?
What was that?
That's not Event 201, right? That's not. Is that?
No.
Because Event 201 came out in 2019. That's a new one?
Yeah, that's the new one that was that they did right before Christmas.
We know what Event 201, that was like a precursor. So, I mean, that's
this
crazy.
is the
I thought that was the same.
No, this is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation conducting this pandemic tabletop exercise.
The whole point of this video is the countries that were able to work together will survive, and the ones that can't, wow, too bad that, their death toll could have been so.
You'll be brain dead, brain paralysis. You'll have brain paralysis.
And so hand over all the power for the environment, global conflict, and, pandemic preparedness. And then we're all good. Check.
And I love, Jean Meserve, who was in that video. She was a former CNN anchor. So they go right to like CNN. Who was who can we grab from? I don't even know if she's former. She might still even be at CNN. Like, we need somebody to lend some credibility to this story.
Yeah.
So she's the one telling us 1 billion
CNN
people have
might
died.
Actually mistakenly air this.
Right. Yeah, we got our hands on Bill Gates' new tabletop exercise for the next pandemic. Here's what's going to happen, and they roll it.
Or they could just roll it as if it's real and then be like, so this, and just go with it. Because, early pandemic was good for their ratings.
And that's the thing. Like, so if you look at like the track record of things, like you look at like H1N1, the bird flu that was supposed to break out and like be a global pandemic, didn't happen. Like how many times they said Ebola is going to break out and then worldwide, didn't happen. Like monkeypox, all these things.
Swine flu.
If you look at how many times they get this, they get this wrong so often. And it's good that they do, but imagine if they had this like massive global response every single time they thought there was going to be an outbreak.
Right.
I mean, we'll be in a constant state of lockdown.
Well, we're in a constant state of emergency, like we covered last night on the show, right? The emergency powers of President Biden, it's a permanent continuation of emergency powers. So we are and that's what they want because it keeps them in power and it continues to fuel the machine of making money.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it also lets them step outside of regulations and things because it's like as long as like the pharmaceutical industry getting past the emergency use authorization, it's that kind of thing. They get extended powers that they normally wouldn't get because there's an emergency.
Yeah,
yes,
that's right.
All right. Well, don't worry though. Bill Gates has got it. World Health, check.
That's great.
We're in hands,
but not good hands.
Just hands.
You're in creepy Epstein hands with Bill Gates. All right,
we've only had dinner 35 times. Now, come on.
Yeah. only dinner on Epstein Island,
Was it 35 times?
I think it was 36 times, right? Wasn't it? Or am I wrong? I think that
was 35, 36, but
yeah. I mean, to fly to his island that amount of times, like, no.
I think of like my 3 best friends in San Francisco. As adults, I have not seen them 36 times since we graduated high school.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Any friend that I flew with on a plane 36 times, I think I would know pretty damn well what they were into.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of dinners. Even if you have like a friends club that you get together every so often, for like, I don't know, like a games night or something like that, or a pub night, a pub crawl, or a, pub trivia or something like that.
I don't think they were doing pub trivia.
Like once every 4 months, 3 months, Anyway, take you
What
years.
What is the first name of the ghost of Ravenclaw, Clayton? Ding, ding, ding. That's what they were doing.
I don't know. Nearless, headless Nick? No.
It's Rowena.
Rowena. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.